Hey everybody, I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us for ILTV's weekly program, One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz. We want to give you, our viewers, a chance to have your questions answered by Professor Dershowitz, one of America's greatest legal minds. He's a leading expert on criminal and constitutional law, civil liberties, and the Arab-Israeli conflict. Hi, Professor Dershowitz. It's so great to see you again.
Great to see you. Thank you. I had a great time at APAC the last few days, and I'm happy to be back in Miami for my last week here.
Yeah, you certainly did, and we're going to actually see some videos of your time at APAC, so let's get started. Today's show, Professor, is a special edition of our program. We're calling it Alan at APAC. You recently attended the annual policy conference of the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, as you mentioned. APAC is dedicated to advocating pro-Israel policies to the Congress and executive branch of the United States. The recent conference held in Washington, D.C. had over 18,000 attendees and speakers from all over the political spectrum in both America and Israel, and you yourself were featured as a keynote speaker in 3 separate panels. Our first question comes from Israeli Minister of Education Naftali Bennett, who is a member of Israel's ruling coalition government. Let's hear what he had to ask.
It's no secret that Alan Dershowitz is a Jewish hero, and I'm very curious to ask you, what are the 1 or 2 things that make you most proud about Israel?
First of all, the fact that Israel was established in my lifetime. I saw it established. I watched it on
How old were you?
10 years old.
Oh my God.
I saw Avi Eben, and
1948.
for me, it was such a thrill.
And I'm getting goosebumps.
To see Israel established, and then no country in the history of the world has contributed more than Israel in the first 69 years of its existence. Talk about a light unto the nations. What Israel has given to the world, medical technology, scientific technology. Now we're going to see space technology. They're going to be the first guys on the moon. Right. They're going to create water out of air.
Right.
It's amazing. Second, no country in history faced with what Israel is faced with, externally and internally, has ever had a better record of human rights, more compliance with the rule of law, more concern for the rights of enemy civilians. So I'm so proud to be a Zionist and so proud to love Israel.
Well, we're proud to love you.
Thank you so much. Good.
Now, Alan, the theme at this year's conference was many voices, but in your opinion, should all voices be welcome under AIPAC's big tent, or are there some that shouldn't be?
Well, every organization has limitations. Black Lives Matter wouldn't allow a Ku Klux Klan speaker to come and spew forth its racial hatred. And AIPAC should also have limits. It's a Zionist organization. Interestingly enough, J Street, which is the one who claims that it wants to have an open tent, has refused over and over again to allow me to speak at its convention or any of its events. It will not sponsor me. It will not allow me. I am boycotted, essentially, by J Street. The Zionist Organization of America, which is a conservative Zionist organization, they allow me to speak. So I think AIPAC should have broad parameters, but there have to be some limits. Anti-Zionists, people who support the BDS movement, they're welcome to protest outside. I even have a cousin who's a member, a distant cousin, who's a member of Neturei Karta, very, very, very ultra-Orthodox. And he comes using my name, Dershowitz, and he protests every year outside of AIPAC. So AIPAC welcomes protests outside, but in order to be one of the speakers, you have to come within the parameters of the organization. That makes all the sense in the world. That's not a violation of free speech. Anybody's allowed to have a soapbox and stand outside, and if you can get a crowd, fine, but there's no reason why AIPAC has to provide you with a crowd to make anti-Zionist or anti-Israel statements. Not only does AIPAC have a broad tent, but you know, I have a very broad tent of people in the Israeli government with whom I am friendly. Obviously, the question from Minister Bennett represents that. I don't agree with much of what Mr. Bennett represents in terms of settlement expansion, etc. But I certainly admire him, and I certainly support his Zionism, just as I support people on the left. For me, if you're a member of the Israeli government, I'm your friend. For me, if you're a member of the Israeli Knesset, whether you're from the Arab bloc or from the settlement bloc, you're part of the Israeli government. And I think it's very important to maintain dialogue between and among various views on Israel. So I welcome the question from Minister Bennett. I would welcome the question from other members of the Knesset, whether it be member of Knesset Herzog or Livni, or even people far to the left of them. I think we have to keep and maintain a civil dialogue within the Israeli government and within supporters of Israel.
Thanks, Professor. All right, now let's hear from member of Knesset Tzipi Livni, who is widely considered the most powerful woman in Israel since former Prime Minister Golda Meir. Livni has served in 8 different cabinet positions throughout her career, setting the record for most government roles held by an Israeli woman. She has achieved a number of milestones in Israeli female political leadership as the first female vice prime minister, justice minister, agriculture minister, and housing minister. Let's hear what she asked you.
I'm here at AIPAC after listening to Alan Dershowitz's great speech. And I see all these people, giving them all the respect and love that he deserves. But yet I want to ask you.
Sure.
What is the situation of Israel these days when people are thinking that everybody is anti-Semitic in the world? What can we do? What can we do in order to take Israel from being, isolated and to turn it into a state among nations?
Well, first of all, I think you made a fantastic speech for the two-state solution and for a democratic nation-state of the Jewish people, which is the only answer to the current conflict. So I hope your views prevail within Israel and within the international community. One of the things we can do is have you out there more often making the kind of liberal case for Israel, the feminist case for Israel, the pro-choice case, the pro-gay case, the pro-Palestinian case for Israel. Because although you say that you're not doing this as a favor for the Palestinian people, imagine what the peace dividend would look like, how much Israel could continue to contribute to the world. So we have to continue to make the case, work with international organizations. I wish you had taken that job at the UN. I wish you could be the ambassador to the UN. I wish you could be the ambassador anywhere. But you have to make more of a case for Israel, because you make one of the best cases that anybody makes for Israel. Coming from you, somebody with an Irgun background, with a Mossad background, with your liberal values, you represent the best of what Israel stands for.
Thank you. And can I ask you another question?
Sure.
Defending Israel, standing for Israel, advocating for Israel. When you look at Israel, are you worried? Are you worried when you look at some of the bills of the decision making in Israel?
And I think,
can we speak about it openly?
Absolutely. I think it's very important to criticize Israel. I think the Amona bill was a disaster. I think efforts to constrain the Supreme Court and to turn it from an organization that follows the rule of law to a more politicized institution. The rules that currently govern the Kotel, all of these are wrong. The extreme role that the very Orthodox rabbinate has over the lives of women, the situation of Agunot, these are all things that we should be critical of. I agree with you. Criticizing Israel, like criticizing America, is a good thing as long as we apply a single standard of criticism. As long as we apply to Israel the standard we are willing to apply to ourselves and to other nations in the world, we benefit from criticism. Thank you.
Let's turn now to a question from Frank Cesno, an award-winning American journalist and former CNN correspondent and anchor. He currently serves as director of the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University. Now, let's hear how his interaction with you went.
So Alan Dershowitz, here you are at the AIPAC conference. We've got a new administration in town. The administration's already sent signals that Israel should slow down on the settlements, uncertain prospects for peace, and the world is not on Israel's side on the issue of settlements. What does it need to do to be on track here?
The Israelis have to be statesmen rather than politicians, and they have to stop settlement growth at this point, certainly settlement growth outside of the settlement blocks that will remain part of Israel as in any deal. The settlement blocks that are now part of Israel that will be exchanged for other land are not barriers to peace in any way. But the external settlements, the settlements that are A, unlawful, or B, outside of the settlement blocks, outside of the security zone, they should stop, and they should not just slow down, they should stop.
They should stop, but that doesn't stop other settlements. So you're not saying stop settlements, as many do.
I'm saying stop settlements. I'm not saying stop all settlement building within existing settlements. That really is not a barrier to peace. But I think stopping all settlements, new settlement growth that takes new land, that seems to me to be something that ought to stop.
And if Israel did that, what could it or should it expect in return?
It should expect the Palestinians to come to the negotiating table.
Is there any reason to believe that would happen?
Yes, I think Abbas has said that he really wants to make a deal. The president wants to make a deal. The Israelis want to make a deal. We got to get them around the table. And I think stopping settlement growth outside of the existing settlements would do that. Now, once before, Israel tried that. They stopped virtually all settlements for 9 months, and the Palestinians didn't come to the table. But I think they're ready to come to the table now, but they have to show that.
Let's say they did that. Let's say they came to the table. Is there any reason to believe the Trump administration is going to have any more success than the Obama administration, or the Bush administration, or the Clinton administration in getting peace?
Well, certainly more than the Obama administration. Dennis Ross proved that when the United States really has Israel's back, Israel is much more willing to make compromises for peace. The Israelis did not believe that Obama had their back. Bush and Clinton are different. And of course, during the Bush administration, Olmert offered them an incredible deal that they turned down. During the Clinton administration, Clinton and Barack offered them an incredible deal that they turned down. So I do think that the have your back theory does work.
We'll see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Professor, speaking of American involvement in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I heard that you recently met with President Trump at a restaurant in Florida. What can you tell us about this meeting?
Well, I can't tell you the content of what we talked about because some of the conversation was obviously private, but he came over to me. I was sitting at a table and he was at the same restaurant in the hotel that he owns. I was there with a friend of mine and my wife, and he came over and we just started to schmooze really for 15, 20 minutes. We talked about a range of subjects, the travel ban, his nominations to the Supreme Court. Obviously, we touched on the Middle East peace prospects. And then he went and had dinner, and Vice President Pence came over and schmoozed with me, and the Secretary of Commerce came over. And then the president came back after dinner just to say goodbye, but he stayed another 15 or 20 minutes, and we schmoozed more about many of the same topics. And it was interesting. You know, I thought I was just going to have a pleasant dinner with my wife and a friend, and I ended up spending more than a half an hour talking to the president face to face. Some of it was with other people at our table, but some of it was just he pulled me aside and he wanted to talk to me in confidence. And he said, you know, he respected my advice, and you know, I hope he will listen. I listened to him. He listened to me. I have no idea whether what I said had any impact on him.
What did you say?
I can't tell you in precise terms, but I did make the case for Israel strongly. I made the case for putting pressure on Abbas to come to the bargaining table and to make the kinds of concessions that are necessary for a mutual peace. I was happy with the conversation.
All right, well, I think I have a lot more questions that I'd like to ask you, but unfortunately I can't prod too much. So we'll turn to our next guest. Our next guest asked you to look at Israel's relationship with the continent of Africa as his country gears up to host a major gathering next year. He also had quite a surprise for you, so let's hear.
I'm Robert Dossi, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Togo. In Africa, in Togo, we were one of the support of Israel in the world. Our choice is we need to support Israel everywhere, politically, diplomatically, and we have a very good bilateral relation with Israel. We will host this next October the first summit between Africa and Israel in Lomé.
And there's no more important continent in the world than Africa in terms of the Israel relationship. Israel can do so much for Africa. Africa can do so much for Israel. working together, they can really change the world. In addition to being a great foreign minister, you also have a pretty good voice. Could you sing a little bit for us in your native language?
Thank you so much. I can sing this song for you.
Okay.
Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu.
Fantastic. Good.
Well, Professor, you both have quite the voices. You got our control room excited over here. So, why, first of all, I actually want to understand, how did he learn that song? Did you ask him?
No, but he said he loves Hebrew songs and tefillot, and he said that song has tremendous meaning for him, as of course it does for all the Jewish people. I loved the melody, and you could see it came from his heart. The country of Togo is very close relations with Israel, and I think can be in the forefront of increasing relationships between Israel and African countries. And Israel is doing an amazing job diplomatically in bringing its resources to Africa. And I see in the future very, very positive relations between developing African nations and the state of Israel. And imagine
why do you
what
think Israel has started focusing so much on improving relations with Africa lately?
Well, first of all, Israel is an Asian African nation. It really lies at the border of Asia and Africa. Egypt is the literal border. And there's no history in Africa of hatred of Israel or the Jewish people as there is in parts of Europe and other places. So I think Israel is expanding its relationships with Asian countries, with India, China, other countries, and with African countries. It will be a challenge. There are going to be some African countries, particularly Islamic African countries, that pose a greater challenge. I think Christian African countries with mixed religious heritages and background, many of them already are very supportive, and Israel can do a great deal for them in terms of bringing technology. The drip technology has already been brought to African countries. The water technology that I spoke about with WaterGen is something that can help African countries enormously, and a peace dividend. If there were peace between Israel and the Palestinians and Israel and the surrounding Arab and Muslim nations, would bring enormous benefits to the nations of Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and all over the world.
Absolutely. Well, Professor, as usual, we'd like to end on a very different note. One of the high points of this year's conference was provided by an up-and-coming stand-up comedian. Elon finds a way to connect to people through his humor while also making them take a deeper look at more important issues.
Hi, Elon Gold here at the APAC Policy Conference in Washington, D.C. with the great, the one and only, the Einstein of our time, Alan Dershowitz.
And I'm here with the Larry David of our time.
Oh, that's too much.
All right,
that's too much. So enough of the accolades for each other. We're here because we both love Israel. We're both Americans who want this strong alliance to continue. But I have a question for you. And by the way, after this question, I'll promote myself. Watch my Netflix special. Go see my bits on Stand With Us, Christmas Tree, all the bits that go viral. Anyway, enough about me. I have a question for you, Alan, which is, how do you think that humor could play a role in the whole Israel situation where there's so much tragedy? As you know, tragedy is comedy plus time. So how could Israel, humor and Israel coincide?
Well, first, you are one of the greatest comedians around. Your Masechet Ha'etz, what if Jews had Christmas trees, and how the rabbis would handle it.
Yes.
It just puts me in hysterics all the time. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Second, people ask what are the greatest contributions that Jews have made to history? Einstein and Freud, humor.
Definitely.
Humor.
George Burns,
We introduced humor. We laugh at everything and everybody, mostly ourselves. When I debate about Israel, I always try to use humor to put down my opponent. Some of the arguments are so unbelievably stupid. I talk about that ad that used to be on TV. with the egg. This is your brain.
Oh, yeah,
and
this
this
is your brain
is
on
your
drugs?
brain on drugs.
Right.
That's the way it works.
That's
You have Noam
funny.
Chomsky, a smart guy. This is his brain on linguistics. Talks about Israel. He looks
It's
like
ridiculous.
a scrambled egg.
Ridiculous.
It's so ridiculous that it becomes funny.
Yeah.
So we have to take it seriously, but the most serious things have to be dealt with humorously, and you teach us that better than we do.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And we need humor. And like you said, we know how to laugh at ourselves. We don't take ourselves serious. We're a serious people. We don't take ourselves too seriously. And humor is just the best way to diffuse any, grave or serious situation. There's humor at Shivas. You ever go to a Shiva? All everyone's doing is talking about, joking about the deceased, and we need it. We need humor.
I have a list of jokes to be told at my show. A list of jokes.
At yours.
At mine.
God forbid. We
list-
need
and
him.
a list
We
of-
need Alan
A list of
Dershowitz.
rugalach that'll be served. The joke
Can I
about
perform?
the guy on his deathbed
Yeah.
smells his wife rugalach,
Yeah.
and he says, "Oh, can I have one before I die?" She says, "No, we're saving it for the shiva." So I made you laugh at one of my jokes.
All right, we're going to check a little bit of his performance out, but I have to say, Alan, that joke is a performance of its own. So why don't we check it out?
But here's the main reason why I'm so happy that Christmas trees aren't part of our traditions and our holidays. If it were, there would be 1,000 rules and regulations regarding the tree. There would be a tractate of Talmud, Masechet Ha'etz, and it would just be chapters and chapters of rabbis arguing about how you shecht the tree, where to shecht it, when to shecht it, if it has a blemish, can you even shecht it at all? What kind of tree must it be? Well, it cannot bear fruit because that would be destroying future food, but it must emit sap. You have to see a droplet of sap, a kazayit of sap, because to show it's a living tree, you can't cut down a tree that's already dead. You got to kill it yourself in the most humane way possible. Can a goy cut down the tree for you? Is it mavushal, non-mavushal? Big machloket, big disagreement. When you're bringing the tree, thank you, there's more. When you're bringing the tree into the house, do you make the bracha before you enter the doorway? Hillel says once your left foot is inside the foyer, it's too late. Shammai says no, as long as both feet aren't in the house. And they both agree it may be too late to make the bracha on entering, but it's never too late to make the bracha on mounting, when you mount the tree. And when you're standing the tree up, you should have in mind all the fallen trees that were killed to make paper and furniture. And when decorating the tree, and this is crucial, you must string the lights right to left, but light them left to right. And if, God forbid, if one of the bulbs is out, the whole string's no good. Each bulb represents Klal Yisrael. And if one of our lights are out, we're all out.
Oh, Alan, I saw you giggling about that. What do you think?
Oh, he is hysterical. He knows, first of all, so much about halakha. He got one thing wrong.
What was it?
He confused Hillel and Shammai. Clearly, Hillel would have had the more liberal interpretation and Shammai the more conservative interpretation. But only one halachic mistake in an entire bit like that, I have to give him enormous credit. He is fantastic. I see him at many Jewish events, and he is the most beloved Jewish comedian. He's basically taken over today from historic Jewish comedians over the years, and he is really among the best in our history.
I guess we all have to keep our eye on what happens with the future of his stand-up comedy. I hope that we can get him here to Israel and in the studio. Maybe we'll have another question for you on the next Ask Alan show. All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. Unfortunately, thanks so much for your time, Professor Dershowitz. I also want to thank all of our guests. If you'd like Professor Dershowitz to answer your questions, go to our Facebook page and submit them. We'll see you again next week. Thanks, Alan.